But the Nolensville Panthers are the team that I'm closest to, and I will tell you, it's glorious. I love coaching the boys. If you get a chance to coach, and I know there's like there are many of you out there that are thinking, yeah, I just don't know enough about football and formations. Wherever you are, if you can hear the sound of my voice, helping coach and support kids outside, away from screens, away from Fortnite, away from all the things that turn them into little zombies, do it. Just do it. It doesn't matter if you're great. Just show up for these kids, because I had people show up for me. It made a huge difference. I'm out there Tuesdays and Thursdays with the 10U Nolensville Panthers. Got a great win this past weekend versus Blackman. Very excited about that. But we're going against Jefferson Street on Sunday, so we're moving forward. We put that behind us. We enjoyed it, and we're working for it. But to see these kids work, to see them put in the effort, and frankly not be in front of a screen is a big deal, and it's something that I'd encourage all of you to support and do it if you can. The Menendez indictment is where I want to lead this show with. I was looking at the U.S. Department of Justice's, they basically do like a sort of a news package when these things hit. This guy just did this for the pure love of the game. And what I mean by that is when somebody gives you gold bars, and you can go to the DOJ's website and see this, you can see the envelopes of cash. I think they have a picture of the luxury convertible and gold bars. When you have gold bars, one of them says Swiss Bank Corporation. It's a stamped gold bar. You can't spin gold bars. There's nowhere to just walk around and say, hey, I'm going to go to Five Guys and just shave off a little bit of this gold bar for them. That's not a thing. And so somebody that accepts that as a means of payment for bribery and corruption is kind of just like in the jam. And this guy has beaten this before. And it's interesting to watch Democrats who have been, what's the word I'm searching for? Insanely pious about this stuff, who have said, hey, we're at the top of the ladder. We know, because we have our moral fiber. We drink it every morning, the moral fiber. All of these Republicans are so corrupt and awful, and even the hint is enough that they should just immediately resign. And then you got this happening to a sitting Democratic senator, and they're sort of confused. They seem to struggle with it. Well, I don't know. Innocent until proven guilty. I don't know. Should I make a public statement? Now, some folks like AOC have come out and said he needs to resign. Fair enough. But a lot of folks have just said nothing. And this to me is just endemic in politics. Like, this is the problem. Is it's when it's the other side, let's come out with the pitchforks and torches and let's go. When it's our side, well, you never know. And tell me here, we've got Donald Trump, who's facing any manner of different indictments, 94 at the last count I saw. And you've got Menendez, who's a senator, facing very clear indictments for corruption, and they've got the gold bars, right? So I can see somebody being consistent between the two and saying, hey, this level of impropriety and these allegations are so strong that, they need to be moved away from public office. But again, the flip side is that presumption of innocence. And so I think you've got to sort of go both ways and say that presumption of innocence, if that's the way we're going to do it, then Trump's entitled to the same deference as Menendez. And if it's, well, I guess just because they're indicted, they're guilty. Okay. But you got to be consistent. You got to be consistent. And we're just not seeing that. That's nowhere in politics right now. So the rest of the things that we're going to talk about over the show, government shutdown. How many of you guys are absolutely tired of talking about government shutdowns? I mean, this is ridiculous. Let me just, before we get in this section, we'll get into it later, but here's the basics. There's going to be saber rattling around a government shutdown. We may even have a government shutdown. And then we shut down for a little bit, and then we do back pay for the people that lost pay, and then we move on. I can already tell you what is happening there. I'll tell you why a little bit later in the show. And I think it's a discussion that we need to have. Have you guys seen this about the German parents who were deported or under a deportation order here in Morristown, Tennessee? This is a German family who came here under an asylum claim because they were essentially going to be fined $9,000 a year for trying to homeschool their kids in Germany. As a matter of faith, they thought that's something they needed to do, so they left Germany. Well, now they find themselves under a deportation order. At the same time, the border is as porous as it's ever been. I have questions. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I was listening to an interview with the El Paso mayor the other day, and he was talking about the number of hotels that had been filled with folks pouring over the border and how they were trying to find basic accommodations for everybody that's coming through. It was a head scratcher for me because I was like, if these folks are coming without any legal permission whatsoever, and then you're basically helping them move about the country, like we have a policy disconnect. We have some real problems in how we're talking about immigration and what we think about the rule of law. And that's not happening.
Well, you have to remember, somebody that's predisposed to homeschooling their kids is more likely to vote Republican, and we can't have that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that. And I think that's the problem, is people see this and they say, wait a minute. You've got a family for what amounts to faith-based reasons saying we need to homeschool our kids. We can't do that in Germany. The administration saying, well, this law is applied to everybody, so it doesn't discriminate against religion. I'm like, it's pretty clearly a religious claim as to what they're saying and why they want to homeschool their kids and why the hardship of $9,000 a year is pretty compelling. But then you see the double standard again, and it's that double standard that makes people lose their minds. Illegal immigration is quadrupled since Joe Biden has been in office. And you can say, well, this was a problem before, this is a problem with the law. I agree with all that, right? That's not saying this is where we are. But again, the double standard is what is getting people fired up. We'll hit that as well. I know that it would be awkward on this station to talk about Biden corruption, but we're going to do it anyway because House Oversight Republicans have subpoenaed bank records that show that the financial beneficiary for some of Hunter Biden's transactions, well, the address listed was Joe Biden's house, which again, in your late 40s, if you're living with dad and making a lot of money, it's a head scratcher. And the fact that congressional Republicans are the ones that are having to investigate this, and we're not seeing any serious traction. And I understand the Department of Justice doesn't talk about ongoing investigations. I get that. But the fact that we see no signs of real digging here, like that there's plenty of smoke, it's concerning. And I'll talk about a little bit about my experience on the Judiciary Committee and some of the things that can mean and why really law enforcement is the best equipped to do a lot of this stuff. And when that's not happening, you've got essentially members of Congress and staffers trying to do law enforcement's job. Then a little bit later, I'm just going to try to make you uncomfortable because I'm going to talk about Biden's Second Amendment defense to those gun charges that he's facing in Delaware. I've got a piece over in the Tennessean. I think he's got actually a compelling case, and I want to know what you guys think. And then the elephant in the room, the GOP debate. I don't know how many of you guys are super excited about the GOP debate. I am aware that there is one this evening. If I hear one more time somebody saying they need to break out, it's just talking points upon talking points that basically say nobody is providing a legitimate alternative to Donald Trump. And that's coming from me. And you guys who have listened to me on the station, I call balls and strikes. I am not a Trump acolyte, but none of the rest of the field is giving Republican voters a very clear alternative and a choice. And that's something that, frankly, is shameful, and it makes me wonder why they're even on that stage. We'll talk about that because it's happening, because it's a big deal. And, man, it's just disheartening that we're going through this exercise, but it's not yet feeling like there's anything there that's a choice, because I think for voters, that's important. I understand the Trump acolytes are like, it's Trump or Trump, no choices. My point is, I think Republican voters and certainly swing voters want choices and options other than Trump, but they're not getting them. And if they don't get them, guess what? Do you really think people want to vote for Joe Biden? Really? I mean, that's the question I ask every one of my Democratic friends is, do you really want to do it? And we'll talk about all these things for the next several hours. I'm glad you're with me. 615-737-9986. You can call in or you can text. We'll have the conversation. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on The Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I tried during the breaks to go to the text line and respond to you guys. That's the easiest way for us to have the back and forth. I can see it in real time when it pops up. And I want to get to a couple of your points before we dive back in. The first is Anthony. He made a really good point that he just said, see, a government shutdown sounds great. Okay, so I can't go to a national park. Bidenomics doesn't allow me to travel anyway. They're too busy giving my money to the rest of the world. All right. I think this is a big point. When we talk about shutdowns, conservatives are like, okay, like, you mean you're going to, like, for real? You'll shut down the government? And they're actually okay with that. And I think this is a great point, a great segue into the discussion of, do you guys actually know what it means when they have a shutdown? Because we just say it like everybody should know. Well, what actually happens, the Congressional Research Service has great reports out there. You can just Google CRS shutdown and you can learn all about it. But basically, they're saying that these appropriations bills have run out and expired, and so they can't make new financial commitments, and employees who are covered by those appropriation bills generally are in a what's called a shutdown furlough. And they tell folks, and all these agencies actually have a shutdown plan. I'm looking at the template right now. It says estimated time to shut down, number of days, the number of employees that are furloughed, the compensation financed by a resource other than annual appropriations, because the annual appropriations bills are not the only things that finance different aspects of government agencies. We've got funds that don't go through that process. So there's a lot of things that, for example, necessary to protect life and property, number of employees. And I think a lot of conservatives are looking at this and saying, well, why don't we do some of this stuff anyway? Why don't we kind of look at the federal agencies and see who indeed is an essential employee for the functioning and purposes of the agency, and let's have that be the federal bureaucracy, as opposed to when we have these conversations, you have what's called, I think it's accepted. Yeah, that's right. Accepted from furlough. This means you are important to the functioning of government. So even if you are not, you're required to work during the shutdown anyway. And so there's a lot of those employees that keep going. So the idea that, well, we have a shutdown and everything immediately stops is just false. That's a lie. It's not true. A lot of the essential functions of government continue even though you have a shutdown, but this is used as a political bludgeon. I've got a piece over on AL.com and the Advanced Media Network that talks about this, this is a game, folks. This is a game. When you start believing that this is dead serious and they've taken it so serious. No, they haven't. They have not taken appropriate funding. The government is one of the basic functions of Congress, but they don't take it seriously because they wait till the last minute. There's a process that has been in place since the 70s on how we do the budget and how we do the process. We're going to talk about why this is a game and why it's bonkers when we come back from the break. And I want you guys to think about all the things that you've heard in the media and all the things that you're being told, that if this shutdown happens, all the bad things. You've been told this repeatedly over the last several years, and we have not had the promised doom and gloom that happens every single time we do this. So if we're going to be serious about these topics, if we're going to have a real discussion about them, we need to stop listening to the media that's telling you all the awful things that will happen, and stop listening to the political class that's telling you this is high stakes and we had no option to avoid this. You've had forever to figure this out.
So you're telling me that if we shut down, all the roads don't close?
The roads do not, in fact, close. Neither do the highways, Bell. There are.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, I know. It's a struggle, but we'll talk about this because it is important that you know the truth. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. Cameron Smith here. I've got to give credit where credit is due. On the Super Text line, somebody point out that the D2 team for the Franklin Cowboys beat the brakes off the Panthers on Saturday. I mean, if you're not getting with your youth football and paying attention, you're missing out. So there you go. Apparently, the D2, that's Division 2. So they have a couple different divisions. The 10U D2 Franklin Cowboys are 4-0. That's pretty serious. So, attaboy. Again, Super Text line, want to get back to this stuff. Yeah, y'all seem to look at it and say, hey, shutdown's a shutdown. If we have non-essential employees, what's a non-essential employee doing the rest of the time? Like, that's a pretty fair question. If you're truly non-essential, why are you there? Only in Washington would we have a category of those and still say, you know what, we should keep them. And not only keep them, but shut the government down, send them home, and then give them back pay for not working. That's cool. That's now that is some job security right there. Yikes. A couple things, again, trying to answer these questions. So the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, has a list of various contingency plans that federal agencies have during a shutdown. So it's not the case that somebody's sitting there and saying, well, this one, no, we're going to kill that. Because if they had to select all this stuff every time we have a shutdown, I think since the 70s, we've had 20 of these funding gaps where it shuts down. The longest was a little over a month during the Trump administration. And they plan ahead. They basically said, okay, in the event that we have a funding lapse, here's what we'll do. When that lapse happens, they implement the plans. But there's a couple things. For example, Social Security and Medicare, checks get sent out. Now, card issuance and some other aspects, address changes, things.
I don't think that's true.
That checks get sent out?
Yeah, Social Security checks, those stop. I have that on good authority from a Democratic representative in Wisconsin that those checks stop.
They don't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Never mind. My bad.
I hate it. It's true. They keep going. Now, some of the other services around, like I mentioned, address change and stuff like that, those don't happen. But the idea that, oh, no, you're going to be sitting at home and have no money because you depend on that Social Security check. Nope. You'll be fine. Some EPA inspections will stop during the 2013 shutdown. That happened. For food inspection, though, here's a good example. During the 2018-19 shutdown, the FDA restored food inspections into the funding lapse because there were products that were considered high risk. And so they said, well, we got to do this. Y'all will love this. This is my favorite. I mean, wonderful. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, you know who's not going to be furloughed? IRS employees. I mean, come on. I can't make this stuff up. But because of the funding that was in the Inflation Reduction Act, the 83,000 employees are exempt during any sort of furlough because they have the money. Sweet. You could see some strain on air travel because air traffic controllers are working without pay. You'll see security checkpoints that might get closed if folks don't report. This is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. The one that I don't get that happens is the shutdown of the national parks. Like, I get it that maybe there's some operational aspects of those parks that couldn't work, but they're just like parks. Like, this was one of the ones, I think you guys remember some of these. Like in Washington, they actively put up gates, or not gates, it's like a barrier around some of the monuments because they had to shut down. And I'm like, wait, you're telling me that a place where people just walk generally, They now cannot walk because we shut down. Okay, cool. Got it. But that's kind of what's happening, right? In a shutdown. The essential functions of government will continue. This will not be a 5-alarm fire because we've done this before, right? You guys remember during the Trump administration, it wasn't that long ago. We did this for, I want to say it was like 34 days, maybe a little longer. It was a little bit over a month. And this is...
And then he caved in spectacular fashion.
Right. But this is what happens every time, and particularly for Republicans. Guys, we do this. And then we can't count, and then we get into a problem. And what I mean by that is that, for example, the Freedom Caucus members, the Matt Gaetzes of the world, are absolutely right to say that we need to get back to pre-COVID spending levels. We jacked that number through the roof and then have come down a little bit, and we're like, okay, we're good to go. No. This is a material deviation that accelerates a number of absolutely atrocious outcomes in terms of like debt service, crowding out of other spending priorities, things like that. So they're right on the thing. Here's the problem. They haven't won enough elections. There's just not enough of them. And even sort of forcing, Matt Gaetz keeps talking about, well, we need to go back to regular order. I again, agree with him. What regular order means is that you have a certain number of appropriations bills every year that go through the committee process and then get enacted into law. The reason that we should do that is because it's not one high-stakes government on or government off bill. And don't think for a minute that this is just a Democratic thing. It's a Republican thing too. They all do it because they like the high stakes, right? It's if you don't vote for this, bad things happen. Well, if you separate it into, 12 appropriations bills, you lose the ability. You can say, actually, I'm not going to vote for that. I'll fund the military, but I have some questions about this interior appropriation. And so you could basically slow walk some, get the ones through that aren't as controversial. It makes a lot of sense. That's the reason the process is designed that way. But the political class says, no, we want high stakes, government on or off. It's like Prego. Everything's in there. It's in there. Whatever goodies or random spending projects, they all get dumped in a continuing resolution or an omnibus. Whenever you hear continuing resolution or omnibus, it means Congress is not doing its job. Period. There's no other way to look at that. But let's walk through this for a second. So let's say Republicans say, nope, we're going to shut it down. There's 5 or 6 of them that say we're going to shut it down. All right, cool. When are we going to start it back up? Chip Roy, who I know, and some other folks have said, well, we're going to draft some spending bills that will work. But if you can't get a majority, nope, we can't start it back up. And so they can't get the numbers. And so we're in this no. And this is what Democrats use as a campaign ad to be like, see, they can't actually govern. And the challenge is that you have to tell your conservative budget hawks, who are so often correct, that we've got to make incremental progress. We've got to get some traction in a positive direction versus getting what we want, which is a return to the pre-COVID spending levels in regular order. And nobody likes to settle for that, right? If you come home and you tell folks, well, we were marginally less horrible. I mean, that's not really a resounding endorsement of your competency. And that's where we find ourselves. But what Matt Gaetz is doing is trying to say, well, if we pass a continuing resolution, then I'll make a motion to vacate the chair for the speaker. Do you guys remember that whole deal? We went through 15 rounds of voting to end up with Kevin McCarthy, who I can tell you he is very good at working with the members, not a great policy guy by any stretch, and he's a California Republican. I'm not going to hate on him, but that's who we ended up with after 15 rounds. So you really think we're going to end up with a Matt Gaetz type person? No. How about Jim Jordan? No. You're just that's the problem with all this. These are idle threats. We're going to shut it down until you stop. Well, you're going to get rid of McCarthy until he gets reelected. And I know nobody wants to hear that. I don't either. But until you send more conservatives to Washington, and what I mean by that, I'm not just going to say conservative broadly, fiscal conservatives who want to do basic math that say we should not spend beyond the revenues we raise. We just shouldn't as a principle. So we need to move back towards that. There's just not a lot. Call it 20, 30 in the House. Maybe 10, 15, maybe in the Senate. You just don't have enough to do the things because it's not popular. Politicians want to give out goodies. They don't want to sit there and say, okay, you put me in office. Now I'm going to take away things you got previously. None of them do. They don't. And it's so hard to do that because when they say that, they're immediately targeted. They're immediately under the gun saying, why do you not care about your constituents? If you really cared about them, you would give them the goodies. And they'll always get primaried and always have somebody that's jumping up and saying that. And that is why we are in the mess that we're in, is because people are constantly trying to sell fiscal discipline and say it's a thing, but it's a fantasy. Because they're not serious about it, because they don't have majorities, because they don't have the votes. So they go up there, they rattle the sabers, say, we're going to have serious reforms, and then it never happens. And we're always disappointed because politicians want to pass out the goodies. And an honest politician will just tell you the truth, that a win for conservatives is moving in the direction of fiscal conservatism. It's not a balanced budget amendment. We are so far away from that, folks. Just get that out of your head. When a politician tells you that they're all about that and they're for that, there is no plan for that to become law. So we are so far away from that. A win for an Andy Ogles or a Desjardins or anybody, a Blackburn, a Haggerty, is we moved in a more conservative direction, and here are the concessions that we got that reduced the deficit materially. And that's awful. Nobody likes that. I'm not excited about that. I don't want to cheer about that, but that's the truth. That's where we are. And so when we as voters get hoodwinked by, they're fearless fighters. They are up there holding the line. They're not holding anything. They're giving bureaucrats a holiday because they don't have a game plan, because they can't get organized and do it. That's the truth. We don't have to like that, but it is the truth. And so don't let them head fake you with this. Don't let them tell you that they're really serious and they're fighters. And if they are giving bureaucrats, non-essential bureaucrats, a paid vacation, they are not fighting for you. And think of that as another way to look at the shutdown. If you had been able to responsibly rein in government, move spending in a direction that is more fiscally conservative, and avoided this shutdown where we pay people not to work, okay. But I'm telling you, I've seen it because we've watched it. This is the process. We do this, we saber rattle, we cave, we go give back pay. It's what we do. Time and time again. And I'm sick of it, and you should be too. And so we need to tell our members of Congress, get your tails in line, get it done, and move us in a direction that's sustainable for our kids and grandkids, because right now we're not on it. I got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. We're in for a few more minutes before the top of the hour break. I'm going to, over the break, tweet out some of these materials that I've been talking about with respect to the shutdown, because I want you to be informed. We can talk about the sort of the platitudes all day long, but that's what the political class does. That's what they want us to do. They don't want us looking at this objectively and saying, guys, this is happening because y'all were irresponsible. And one of the texters there were two good points from two different texters that I want to address. One, there are contracts that work has to stop. And so there are people affected by this that aren't necessarily the federal employees that will get back pay. There are contractors that have to stop working. So I want to be fair to that. I want to be honest. Again, truth matters. But I also think if we're able to understand this with clarity, we can go in a better direction. Because what's happening right now is that people don't know. They hear shutdown and they're like, oh my, I don't know what I'll do. The other point that was made on the super text line that I wanted to emphasize was that this is due to irresponsibility over time. Okay? This is not a situation where, when I'm telling you the best we can do right now is incremental fiscal conservatism, that's because we didn't do it previously. When we were blowing money out the door for COVID, that would have been a great time to be like, guys, I mean, the economy looks like it's actually doing okay. Should we do this? That didn't happen. It was just a discussion of how much. And I guess in theory, it could have been worse, and that's a win, maybe. I don't know. But it's those moments in the past that have led us to where we are. And so now we're so deep in the hole. So when I tell you, hey, this is reality. The reality is that we make a material dent in the deficit versus anything that approximates a balanced budget. It's not because that's what I want. It's because we didn't do what we needed to do for a long time. And then we kept electing these jokers. We said it's somebody else's problem. It's not my member of Congress. It's somebody else's. Mine are fine. It's somebody in New York or another. No, actually, it was yours. They went along with it. And that was the big issue, is that far too many people said, well, we don't want to shut it down. We want to just let it go and hope it all works out. And then this is where we end up. And we do it. Now we're going to do it again and again and again and again. And every time they're going to walk us to the edge and tell us it's over. Y'all come back in the next hour. We got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. The stage is set for the second GOP presidential debate tonight at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California. Former President Trump and front-runner will not be there.
Heading into tonight's debate, a new poll by 538 Ipsos and the Washington Post find 66% of Republican primary voters say they are at least considering voting for Trump. He runs away with the most support. He won't be debating tonight, but 49% of Republican voters say they're also considering voting for DeSantis. Republicans are expecting Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley to perform the best tonight and say immigration and the high costs of living are the most important topics. Alex Stone, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Trump is on the ground campaigning in Michigan. He'll address non-union workers tonight, just one day after President Biden joined United Auto Workers on the picket lines. The president urging Congress to pass a measure to avert a partial government shutdown this weekend. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy vowing to take take a vote on a continuing resolution with border provisions attached, even though a handful of hardline Republicans may block that measure. ABC's Jay O'Brien says there's also a bipartisan Senate stopgap measure waiting.
It will be up to McCarthy as to whether or not to put it on the floor, and he has indicated, he hasn't fully said yet, but he's indicated he doesn't support the Ukraine funding in there, which is leading a lot to believe that he's not going to put that bill on the floor for a vote to avert a government shutdown. So right now, it's looking unlikely that if that gets out of the Senate, it would pass out of the House and avert a shutdown by Saturday.
In New York City, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez entered a plea of not guilty to federal corruption charges today. The New Jersey senator and his wife are accused of accepting cash and gold bars in exchange for selling state secrets to benefit Egypt. Lottery fever building. Tonight's Powerball jackpot now swelling to an estimated $835 million. You're listening to ABC News.
Do we have Cameron? Hello, Cameron?
You're hilarious.
You start the show. My bad.
I thought I had another minute. Bell over there giving me a hard time. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy while he focuses his creative efforts on Matt Murphy, the musical. I mean, if you guys aren't excited about that, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with you.
Lots of show tunes.
Lot of show tunes. It's just the number of times that I'm in studio with Matt and then it's a break and he breaks into song and finally he had that moment where he realized I could put this to music. I could do what I do with talk radio to music and dance. Obviously, you don't want to have a musical without dance. And so he's working on putting that script together right now. Big if true. So there's that. We've been talking about shutdowns, And over at D Cameron Smith, that's my Twitter X handle, whatever you want to call it now. I posted, you can do hashtag TN Politics too if you want to search for it that way. Just some information about the shutdown. Be informed and don't believe the political spin. Just don't. It's a waste of your time. It's disappointing. You should be disappointed. This should feel gross to you that we're doing this again and again and again. And every time, it's not like there's new arguments. Every time it's the same thing.
And let's be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, the Republicans will cave.
Yes.
They're as determined to spend that money as the Democrats are. It's just for different things.
But that's the money. That's the numbers thing, Bell. Like Bell's making the right point. Is there's nowhere close to a majority of conservatives that say, how about we just not spend the money? We have different spending priorities. That's the difference between Republican and Democrat right now. And I know I'm being harsh about this because it's ridiculous. I've been on Capitol Hill when this stuff happens. I've watched the game, right? I've seen how this works every time. And okay, you might have a different vehicle or you do something, but at the end of the day, the government's going to get funded. It's not going to be drastically off the levels that we're talking about now. It's just that we get this like weird moral victory, I guess. This is like a Butch Jones Life Championship, right? It doesn't really count for anything, but if it makes you feel good, whatever. And my point to you guys is don't feel good about it. It should feel gross that they don't do their job until the last minute and then tell you we must do a thing or people will get hurt. Like that is the definition of irresponsibility. And I'm going to lose my mind if we keep talking about it. So I want to move on to a different topic. I hope this one doesn't cause me to lose my mind just as much. I want to get the story right. Let me pull it up. Because I could not believe that this was happening in Morristown, Tennessee. Okay. There's this, and I apologize if I pronounced the family wrong, the Romicki family, where two of the kids are U.S. citizens. They were born here. They left Germany because there's a homeschooling ban there. Basically, and I heard it on the news this morning, that the penalty per year for violating the German law that's been in effect since 1919 was like the equivalent of $9,000 a year, something like that. So it's basically the exemptions from compulsory state education in Germany are extremely rare. They have a heavy hand of government, nothing like we have here. And ours is problematic enough, but this is a different animal. And they wanted to educate their children based on concerns that the public school, tell me if this sounds familiar, that public school curriculum in Germany featured anti-Christian teachings and sexual elements. They were initially granted asylum, but the government appealed it, and it was overturned on appeal. And then the Obama administration granted them indefinite deferred action in 2013. And so this family has been here now for 15 years. And now they're subject to a deportation order. And Representative Harshbarger has introduced a private bill. You can have what's called a private bill for relief that they introduced in Congress. She's introduced H.R. 5423 that could give them the relief that they're seeking and give them permanent resident status. But this is just a wild story. And they come in because of these concerns, frankly, concerns that many conservatives share about public education in the United States right now. They had these, but there was a a financial hammer in Germany over their ability to homeschool. And so they came and then ultimately were denied because the government appealed and said, actually, this law applies to everyone. It's equal, and the German government has an interest in essentially ensuring non-discrimination across good grief. Yet, meanwhile, our southern border, come on, folks. I mean, we've got a situation where we're playing these games with this family. And I'm fine. I mean, I'm actually fine if the answer is, well, your asylum claim is not applicable and we adjudicate this thing as we're not granting you asylum, and then they go back. Fine. But the fact that they're here for 15 years because of choices the political class made, and now in this administration is the time to deport them. Tell me more. You mean the same administration where illegal immigration has quadrupled since Joe Biden became president? You mean that one? And this is when I began to show what I was talking about. These are the double standards that Americans are tired of. We need an orderly system of immigration, period. We haven't had that. I blame everybody. There were opportunities time and time again to reform this, to make our system make sense. I worked on it personally when I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee for Jeff Sessions. We looked at New Zealand's program and other programs that were point-based immigration systems that said, what are the economic demands that the country needs, and how do we match that with the applicants? And if we want to have a visa lottery for some folks, a small one, that's fine. But let's have a system that works and let's enforce it. I am flabbergasted at the very concept that people are walking across the border. We are then meeting them, processing them. Some of them we never meet. They just keep on going. Some of them make claims, and then we process them and release them into the interior of the United States. Some of them show up for their hearings. Other folks do not. And it's common sense. There are people who've gone through the right process that have legal permanent status and are on their way to becoming citizens. And then we have people that just kind of do whatever they want. And this is finally becoming an issue of such size and scale that it's going to actually hurt Democrats. And I mean that because previously this has been like a niche issue. And I say that specifically that conservatives really cared about. But the argument from Democrats is like, okay, if you're not on the border, like in Tennessee, why do you care? Like, it's not that big of a deal. There's not that many immigrants. Well, then these immigrants who are here making asylum claims and other things are being moved all around the country to all different places. And it's at such volumes that people are saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. When New York City is saying, one of the largest cities in the world is saying, we've had enough. We're at a breaking point. It starts to become a national issue and not just like a southern state issue. And I think that this is the biggest issue that Democrats are ignoring right now. And I'll give credit to what Republican governors figured out to do. They said, okay, fine, you're going to release these folks. We'll make sure that they have information on what they need to do. We're not going to kidnap them. But if they're in destinations New York, then let's send them there. We want to help them get on their way. This was such a smart idea by DeSantis and other folks to say, if we're going to play this game, instead of just overloading border cities, let's make everybody feel this. And so I heard the mayor of El Paso that saying, hey, we want to make sure that once we get folks processed, we see their final destination and where they're going. We get them on a bus to where they need to go. Wow. Now it's becoming a matter that in the past year and a half, more than 100,000 migrants have arrived in New York City. There 60,000 reside in temporary government shelters. I mean, it doesn't sound like from the millions and millions of people in New York, oh, this is no big deal. Well, it is when you got to figure out how to house them and what to do with them and not just have them wandering around in your streets. And that's the game changer here, is that people are starting to pay attention in blue cities. And the polling has changed. And I get it. Polls, I understand a lot of them aren't there. But CBS News found that only 34% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's handling of the issue. And the only lower issue is inflation. Among Hispanics, that figure is 29%. Independents, and this is the one, among independents, his handling of immigration, 26%. And so Democrats are starting to pay attention. It's starting to be real uncomfortable. And this is an issue where I think the business lobby and other folks that wanted cheap labor, like, I get it. I understand seasonal workers and stuff like that, and I don't mind some of that. But the idea of we're going to use this to immigration that's unrestrained to push down wages, no. We have a system where we can bring in seasonal labor. We've got a system for that, and that's fine. But the idea, we've got laws and processes in place that if you've got a job that you're advertising for, you have to advertise to see if other people will do the job first before you can go get those temporary workers. That's the law. That's the process that's in place. And playing these games where, hey, we'll just flood it and we'll have people on standby just hanging around who work for real cheap and under poor conditions, that ain't so great. And so I want to continue to talk about this issue when we get on the other side of the break, because I think this is going to be a game changer in the election in ways that it hasn't been before. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith. And as I mentioned before, I've put out some information on the topics we're talking about in the show on X, Twitter. I wish they would make it just easier to call it one or the other. Because whenever I say X, people are like, X what? And no, you know what I mean. The social media thing, at D Cameron Smith. You can go look there. A couple things from the Super Talk text line that y'all have asked about. Regarding the German family and their claim, if you want to help create pressure on the administration, call your member of Congress. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do and say, hey, are you paying attention to this? What are you going to do to help? Like I said, it's in Harshbarger's district, but you can call your member and say, hey, are you going to support this private relief bill? Are you going to engage there or not? A couple folks had asked, well, I don't think education is a asylum claim. I think their grounds was religious persecution, that saying this was based on their Christian faith. This is how they'd chosen to educate their children. And this was because of their faith, they were being persecuted by the German government. And I actually think that's a fair claim. Now, do we want, I mean, this is kind of where the devil's in the details in terms of asylum claims. Typically, asylum claims are something like, you're afraid for your life because of a despotic regime. Do we want to encapsulate these type of concerns? I think it's certainly something to consider, because if somebody wants to come to America because they really appreciate and love our take on religious liberty, I think they're probably going to appreciate it a lot more. And I mean, that's for example, again, I understand we have to have an orderly system, and I support that. But like the folks coming from Venezuela, the idea that they're going to be big liberals is no, they're going to be like, communism is the worst. Like, we hate it. That's who's fleeing Venezuela. The people who just love communism are staying in, well, they're running Venezuela. They're not really staying there. No one seems to be staying there. But that's the point, is these claims matter, but we want to have people in the United States who are here because they really want to be here, because they believe in the U.S., because they believe in the liberties that we have here. That matters to me. That matters in an immigration system. I'm not looking for somebody who's saying, I want to be at the head of the line because I want economic opportunity that, frankly, somebody else in the United States wants. It's, I want to be in the United States because I love who you are, because I see you as the kind of people I want to be like, and because the liberties that are protected by your Constitution matter. That's pretty compelling to me. I understand some folks it's not, but to me, that's a big deal. Another thing on the Super Talk text line that I wanted to mention, the private relief bill, some of y'all have asked, that Harshbarger introduced is H.R. 5423. H.R. 5423. And that would give them permanent resident status for the family. And so if you're calling your representative, say, hey, where are you on H.R. 5423? And it's the Romeike family, Romeike. Romeike. And at the next break, I'll post this Washington Times article so you guys can read a little bit more about it, and the bill numbers located in there. So we'll knock that out. But I think we have to be, when we're talking about immigration and these kind of issues, we've got to make sure that it makes sense, right? I mean, that's the thing that we've lost sight of. It's just flow. It's just volume of more or less. And that's not really the right way to look at immigration. It's, what are our needs as a country that we can't meet with presently with our population? And I'm telling you, and I've said this before, and I've said it on air, and I've said it in writing, population issues in my lifetime and in my children's lifetime will visit the United States. And if we do not have a system of immigration that can attract the world's talent to come to the United States, it's going to be brutal. And there's some countries like Japan that are going to have failure concerns, like as a country, because they have an aging population that they're not replacing. And the United States, the one thing that we can do that can give us an advantage is a common sense immigration system that can address our needs as we go forward. And so don't have this attitude that immigration is good or bad. Immigration is necessary. We are a nation of immigrants in the United States. The idea that we should be suspicious and all immigrants are this or that, well, guess what? You're probably related to one. So that needs to go away. That's what Democrats use to beat up Republicans over and over again, is that, well, this is xenophobia. The Republicans, they don't want anybody that isn't a white Christian. It's not true. We want something that makes sense. We want a system that makes sense. We want laws that are enforced consistently and evenly. So we don't have a double standard like a German family saying, we've been here 15 years and now we're getting deported, while floods of other immigrants just walk right across the border. That's what Republicans are asking for. So when you know how Democrats and liberals are going to try to hit us, don't give them something easy. Tell them that you're for something that makes sense, that systems that work and serve America's needs while being a leader and a beacon of hope in the world. Reagan's shining city on a hill is not something that we should lose sight of. It's not something that we should give up on just because we're having a crisis on the southern border. We should tell them how this needs to be and say, hey, if you want to get on board with this, that'd be great, because what you're doing now under Joe Biden is just lawlessness. It is ineffective. It doesn't work. So get to the table. Let's have a discussion about what can work. And I think where they're overplaying their hand is that a lot of these immigrants, if they have economic opportunity, if they can see the American dream, they're socially pretty conservative. We're going to talk about Biden corruption on the other side of the break, but I've got to take a break right now. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, and I have just tweeted out, I let Bell know that, it's Reagan's sitting on a hill from his farewell address. So you can go watch a fun YouTube clip on that one. But I also put a link to the Washington Times article about the German family facing deportation because they wanted to homeschool their kids. So go check that out at @DCameronSmith. Again, I'm going to try it until you guys go along with it, but hashtag TN Politics is a great way to sort stories related to what we're talking about on Super Talk, other things that are interesting to folks in Tennessee. It's great. Catch the fever. Okay. So I told you we were going to talk about Biden corruption. It seems like there's something new all the time. And I want to be real specific about this because
You want to see my temper? Keep going.
I want to see your temper. I want to see the president of the United States seem more coherent. How about that?
Where are you? Where is everybody?
We don't know.
I don't know.
You've taken it too far, Bill. Like you're just having too much fun laughing over there at this. Okay. I'm laughing at this story. The headline is House Oversight Republicans say new bank subpoena shows Hunter Biden listed father's Wilmington house in wires with China. Okay. Guys, at some point, we have to just say this is super shady. And by we, I mean every American. And the hard part here for a lot of conservatives is to separate how ridiculous Hunter Biden is from his dad. And that's been the issue all along, is Biden has basically been like, whatever he did, that was on him. Like, I don't talk to my son about that stuff. And then Republicans keep saying, but like, here's a situation where you talk to your son's business colleagues. Here's a situation where you were on a phone call with your son's business colleagues. This isn't evidence of the corruption that Menendez, for example, is indicted on. But it sure looks bad. And now the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed a bank for Hunter Biden's records and have 2 wire transfers from Chinese nationals to Biden that listed Joe Biden's Wilmington Delaware home as the beneficiary address. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation why a 40-something person making a lot of money would not actually live anywhere and would just be using their parents' mailing address. Okay. Again, I want to be precise here. I worked on Senate Judiciary Committee, and I was able to see the type of investigative capacity that a Senate committee has. And I've seen it with the House too. I work for the House of Representatives. You typically don't have trained law enforcement investigators trying to find out, okay, was a crime committed here? You can subpoena information. That is true. You can do that with Congress. But connecting the dots and doing, for example, forensic accounting, that's extremely expensive and technically precise. Like, that's a field. It's not that I, as an attorney, who, hey, at least half of y'all say is a pretty smart guy. The other half, definitely not sure. I'm not fit to be a forensic accountant. I understand basic accounting principles. But the idea of I'm tracking flows of money to make sure that this person, to basically say this person did that thing, that's a different animal. And that's part of the problem here. It's not that the House isn't doing what it should do. It's that law enforcement doesn't seem to be. And I think where we are is that Hunter Biden undoubtedly traded on his dad's name. The big man. He's a guy that, vice president. you want to do business with me, right? That kind of stuff. That happens in politics all the time. It's in most cases, it's not illegal because you're simply benefiting from a biological relationship or a marital one. Where you get in trouble is when you take official actions for those things. Where Menendez got indicted was, hey, these gold bars were in exchange for something you did in your official capacity. That's where you get in trouble. And I think what's happened here is the lines have gotten pretty blurred. That Hunter Biden pretty clearly has had some real neat, exotic life experiences, some of which appear to be criminal and some of which he's indicted for. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the problem is that you now have to tie it back to Joe Biden. And this attempt to do this, his lawyers, for example, have said the moment the facts come out, he said it, quote, evaporates in thin air. His lawyer said that Hunter Biden made an investment in Baha'i Harvest Rosemont Partners, where this Chinese businessman, Jonathan Lee, is CEO, and that the year of the wire transfers were basically a documented loan, not a distribution of payout that was wired from a private individual, this is a quote, to his new bank account, which listed the address on his driver's license, which was his parents' address, because it was his only permanent address at the time. They've got answers for everything. And my point here is if we think all this is perfectly fine and that the connection between Hunter Biden's business activities and Joe Biden, we should want to clear the air of any impropriety here, because it's clear that what the son was doing, that I don't think is particularly controversial. It's clear that Hunter Biden used this guy was literally, it's documented. He wrote in a book, he was a crackhead. And so this is not a guy that for his acumen and skill set, he would be particularly highly sought after in the international marketplace, but for his relationship with his dad. And so it's one thing to say he did that and he solicited that, but the real issue is, did it connect in any way to the Biden administration? Were there any official actions that resulted based on Hunter Biden's business dealings? Did Joe Biden benefit financially for different administrative actions and things like that? If he did, that's a crime, and that's a huge issue. If he didn't, then Hunter Biden's pretty much the person we thought he was, that he had no ability to actually do anything with it. He was just selling a bill of goods. And based on his life trajectory, I wouldn't put that past him. But that's the job of law enforcement, right? And in this case, you've got the DOJ doing some Hunter Biden-y things. We see the gun charges in Delaware. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But looking at taxes and these other things, but we don't get the sense that there's a clear investigation into, does any of this stuff tie to Biden? And that's what the House Republicans are left to do. Senate Democrats aren't going to do it. House Republicans have to figure out is there a tie? Can they connect? So far, they haven't been able to. I do think that kind of investigation matters, then I think it's ongoing. But you've got to connect the two. You can't just say Hunter Biden's a bad dude and he's Joe Biden's son, so impeachment. That's not a thing. And at the same time, shame on law enforcement for not taking a lot of this stuff more seriously, not digging and seeming to be interested. Now, we could be shocked and the DOJ could come out with, charges that amount to the same type of thing that's happened with Trump. Very serious crimes could be alleged against Joe Biden by the Department of Justice. I just don't see it happening. And the real question is, well, did you thoroughly investigate it or not? Because there's a lot of smoke right here. A lot of smoke. It does not mean there's fire. I want to be really clear. It's entirely possible Hunter Biden's the guy we thought he was. He didn't involve his dad in the business dealings. He just used him for his own benefit. That would seem pretty on brand. But man, there's enough smoke that we want to know, are we sure that there's no connection here? And that's what we got to find out. And law enforcement should do it. House Republicans are now trying to do it, but they're just not equipped. They're not equipped to do this particularly well. And the part of the problem is you've got a tension between investigation and communication. So the political staff over there in the House is wanting to communicate this stuff, right? And say, look, see this bad thing. The investigation folks are going to be like, what? Hang on. Let's run this to ground and make sure we know exactly what it is. And the political folks say, no, we got to use this. We got to pop that out there. We got to show that there's more smoke. And the problem is, if they're able to quickly disprove or prove there is no connection to Joe Biden, we look silly. Republicans look silly. And that's where we are. That's the exchange. That's what's happening right now. And that's why we don't want law enforcement to be politicized. I understand why a lot of folks say, yep, it's clearly politicized. But that's why we don't want it politicized, because we need law enforcement to be independent. We need them to be making choices about the investigation, applying the law to the facts and reaching a conclusion based on that, not about the political outcome that they want. Because whenever that happens, we're in trouble as a nation, not just our political class that benefits or is harmed by that. But like, it's a bad place for us to be. None of us should like any kind of politicization of the Department of Justice, the FBI, anything. And frankly, we should, when Trump said, hey, I'm going to go after my political opponents with the Department of Justice, we're going to go, lock them up, that kind of stuff. And then he kind of backtracked that, which was smart. We should just say no. When Republicans take office, we should not use the Department of Justice for political purposes. Democrats shouldn't either. It's wrong. And when you have that situation, you have that perspective, these are the type of things you get. Because we don't trust, and I don't trust, I'll be specific about that. I don't trust that this is being handled objectively. I don't have a good faith reason to believe that there's a thorough investigation going on to those ties between Hunter Biden's business dealings and the official actions of then Vice President Joe Biden. That to me is what I want to know. I want to know that that's happening. And if that is a thorough investigation and it's done, I want to know that, hey, this is cleared, because that actually matters. And I understand that you don't want to talk about like, for example, if I'm investigating Bell for a crime as a DOJ prosecutor and we look into it and say there's no crime here, we don't publicly go say Bell didn't commit a crime. We just end it. Then that's it.
Where do I go to get my reputation back?
Right. I mean, but if we announce that, then we damage Bell's reputation. We say we were looking at him. We didn't get him this time. So that's the reason they don't. But in some of these situations, like if I'm President Biden, I'm saying, look, folks, I know what I did and didn't do. So I need you to take a robust look at this and clear me so we can move on. And then it begs the question of, imagine that Merrick Garland comes out and says, you know what? Joe Biden he didn't do anything wrong here. Is anybody going to believe him? Well, I don't know. I don't think so at this point. But when we come back from the break, I'm going to make you choose between putting Hunter Biden in prison and defending the Second Amendment. You can only pick one. We'll talk about it when we return from the break. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7, and I'm Cameron Smith. Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to the Matt Murphy Show. Matt is live and well. He just called in me to take the lumps today. And so I'm happy to do so. And I appreciate you guys on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. This is a great way to communicate with you guys. And it's a lot of fun because I can see it live in real time. A couple things. One, several of y'all have mentioned impeachment. I am all for an impeachment inquiry that gets us more information than we already have. Republicans have been using subpoenas and trying to get this information related to this interaction between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden for most of this Congress. So if we can get new information, great. I'm all for it. The standard for impeachment is high crimes and misdemeanors. It is political, so frankly, it's whatever Congress wants it to be. But the Constitution standard is high crimes and misdemeanors. The idea is that we don't impeach people for being bad at their jobs. A couple of you guys mentioned that specifically, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are both bad at their jobs. I would agree with that. I do agree with that. That's not a standard for impeachment. The southern border is a great example of complete dereliction of duty. It's your responsibility as president to keep the nation safe. That's one of the basics, right? And not being able to enforce the law, not doing that stuff is a huge problem, and it's solved in elections. The idea, impeachment is basically the House and the Senate substituting their judgment for that of the American people. It is an extraordinary remedy, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And that's something we need to get back to for both parties, because now it feels sort of, if we're honest, it feels like Democrats knew day one, literally day one. They were talking about it up to Trump's inauguration. We're going to impeach this guy. Okay. That's not the way to handle this. The standard is high crimes and misdemeanors, and if you think it reaches that standard, then impeach. If not, don't. But it shouldn't be like, well, you impeached our guy, now we're going to impeach your guy. Now we impeached your guy, now you're going to, we're just going to do this indefinitely. It's going to be a waste of time and resources. Find the crime, find the connection. If you do, impeach. Bingo. Like, that's it. And to say, well, Democrats did the thing, so now Republicans should do the thing. Really, guys? That's the standard you want? We're going to do it like the Democrats did. I don't think so. Come back after the break. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
It is 2 o'clock. I'm Mac Morey with your top stories. Right now, 88 degrees in Nashville, partly sunny over there in southeastern Rutherford, though, so you can expect a chance of strong thunderstorms will impact that area, as well as west central Warren, northern Coffee, and northeastern Bedford for around the next 15 minutes. And that's just coming with thunderstorms and maybe some penny-sized hail and strong wind. Got a complete forecast just a few minutes away. U.S. Senator Bob Menendez pleaded not guilty in federal court today to bribery charges. His wife, Nadine, also pleading not guilty in the case. Political pressure mounting on the senior senator from New Jersey. Details from Jay O'Brien.
At least 20, if not more than 20, of Menendez's fellow Senate Democrats have called on him to resign. That includes perhaps Menendez's closest ally in the Senate, the fellow Democratic senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker, who was a character witness in Menendez's last corruption trial in 2017. Nonetheless, Menendez says he is not going to step down. Leader Schumer said it was good of him to step down as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, a position he's accused of abusing. But Menendez says despite stepping down from that position, he's not leaving the Senate anytime soon. He's up for re-election in 2024.
And right now in Nashville, Metro Police say they arrested the person who injured kids at a bus stop. 22-year-old Sylvester Buford was arrested yesterday for a shooting on September 11th that injured a 16-year-old and grazed a 6-year-old as they got off a school bus in the Cumberland View neighborhood. Police say Buford was in a shootout with someone in another car, both of them recklessly firing shots in the direction of that bus stop, but it was Buford's bullets that injured the two kids. The 16-year-old was shot in the shoulder. The 6-year-old was treated for a graze wound to the back. Buford's bond set at $75,000. And NASA scientists have removed a capsule containing rocks and dust from an asteroid that's as old as the solar system. The sample was taken by a spacecraft designed to land on asteroids. Here's more on the mission from Derek Dennis.
The OSIRIS-REx mission from NASA has brought back to Earth the first ever sample from an asteroid. Carefully ensconced in a special canister, scientists found black dust and debris on the canister's surface, indicating some of the asteroid material had leaked out during the return trip to Earth. Inside, rocks and more dust from the ancient asteroid Bennu, which is believed to be part of the early solar system. Scientists will continue to examine it and then store it away for future analysis.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt. And man, you guys have been great today. This has been awesome. I love it when I get the opportunity to have the exchanges with you guys. And man, on the Super Talk text line, 615-739-9986. Let me say that again because I can't speak clearly. 615-737-9986. So as a columnist, one of the things I love about you guys is I get to see the reaction in real time. It's a back and forth. It's an exchange. And I really appreciate y'all engaging me on that because this studio is kind of lonely without you guys. I mean, some of us can talk for a really long time by ourselves. but it's a lot more fun when y'all engage. And so I want you to know how much I appreciate you guys. I write for the Tennessean. I'm on the editorial board over there. I write for AL.com and Advanced Media down in Alabama. And my day job is with a company called Thanks in Franklin. And they are the most wonderful people who are bringing back gratitude in business. And that's something I'm excited about. And if you hadn't gathered, right and wrong and virtue, I'm a little bit old school in this regard. They matter to me. They matter a whole lot. And so when I can be part of things politically or otherwise, where we're going to try to do what's right, that's what I try to do. And so when we have the exchanges, and I'm going to push back on some of you guys, and in some instances, pretty seriously, because as a conservative, I believe that individual liberty matters. I believe that our ability to disagree and have discussions, I'm hitting the microphone, great, really matters. And so far, what I've seen a lot of is people from both political parties telling me, you must agree with everything that I have to say, or you can't be a part of what I have to offer. And to that I say, that's garbage. If you're telling me, and this is where, and I know I'm going to offend, because when it comes, and we've had this conversation on the Super Talk text line, we'll get into the GOP debate this hour, and we'll talk about the candidates and alternatives. The Republican Party, guess what? There are a lot of us in here. Some folks are like, Trump's the guy, he's got to be the guy. There's folks on this radio station that they are as Trump loyalist as there will ever be. I'm not a loyalist to anybody, particularly not any politician. Let me be clear on that. I'm not a loyalist to any politician. Because my savior's not political. Jesus is my savior, and that has, I don't need a politician to fix it for me. And so when I start looking at this stuff and see folks that essentially are doing loyalty pledges, like, I'm not about loyalty to politician. I'm a conservative. They work for me. I'm a loyalist to principles. And you can tell me, well, that's make-believe. There are no principles anymore. This is a gutter war, and we've got to do everything they do. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. And so I understand that can be a point of disagreement, but this is where I think Republicans and conservatives have to be importantly different. We have to say, you know what? We're going to preserve the right for us to disagree. Period. Because one of the things that Republicans always assail Democrats about is, well, it's one size fits all. This is the way to do it, and you may not dissent from the orthodoxy, from the woke mob, whatever it is. Okay. Well, then you can't take that same approach towards Republican politics. You can't say, hey, you can only do the things I like, and if you disagree, you can't be with me. Well, that is a way to have a very tiny tent and not win a lot of elections. And I'll tackle this one. This is fun. If you're so conservative, why are you linking up with the Tennessean? Completely liberal and woke. All right. Let me tell you something. The USA Today Network in Gannett is the largest newspaper syndicate in the country. It reaches a massive audience. So if I want to talk about conservative ideas, about limited government, personal responsibility, the rule of law, push back on this immigration nonsense on the southern border, should I only go to a conservative outlet where everybody agrees with me? Or should I try to win over folks who might? And if you can answer that question, then you understand why I absolutely engage the Tennessean. I have a lot of fun ribbing the folks over there. And Matt jokes regularly when I'm on the show on Wednesdays, well, he's over in the conservative closet over there. Okay, fine. But the point is that we have to go and sort of change people's minds. Some of you guys just want to preach to the choir. You want to say that I get what I want, and I only want to listen to people that say exactly what I want to hear, and that's it. Well, that's dumb. I want to be real clear about that. And I see this all the time. Your editorials will never make the front page or even close. My editorials have been on the front page of the opinion section, which is one of the largest sections in the remaining paper, all the time. I write columns every week. They're in print. They run my stuff. Why? Because they realize that conservatives are the majority in a state like Tennessee. And so, yeah, people are surprised when they see my stuff over there. But that's who we want to engage. That's the point. Yes, I agree. Somebody said a Christian voice needs to be in those places more. Guess what I get to do? I get to talk about my faith. And sometimes that's tough too, because I'm going to the church and saying, folks, we got teenagers sitting out there that want to have nothing to do to the church because we have nothing to offer them. We don't even do a good job of conveying the gospel. And I can write that. I can talk about that. So what I'm telling you folks is the idea that you want an echo chamber that just agrees with you, that's not a good idea. And you're not going to get it from me. I want to constantly challenge, particularly the political class, because they take nonsense and tell us it's the way to go. And we shouldn't just blindly follow anybody in politics. You shouldn't. And I think that if we're not in those rooms, then we're not doing it right. And as an article of my faith, if I'm not in the room with people who don't believe what I believe, then how in the world could I fulfill the Great Commission? How could I go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations? How could I go tell them the gospel? How could I do the things that I do as a matter of my faith if I'm never around people who are different than me? And so I want to put that out there because this comes up a lot, and I see it, and I wish you guys could see the interface that I have on the text line. There's about half of y'all that are like, preach. Like, we've been dying for this. And the other half are like, you are a rhino, and I can't believe you're so hateful and rude. Well, if I'm going to disturb the political class and you think that's hateful and rude, then that's how we're going to roll. And in my columns and when I engage, that's the thing. And I want us to be more like that. If you are all in with Trump, good for you. You should defend that and say, this is my choice and this is why. But the idea that nobody else gets a choice and nobody else can think otherwise or think DeSantis or Haley or somebody else could be a good candidate, that's a Democratic mindset. This is the anointed one. You cannot pick otherwise. And now they're ending up with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they can't figure out how not to run the worst political ticket in history. Like, think about that. That's their mindset is, well, Joe Biden is the incumbent president, and he's a bridge politician, and Kamala Harris is the future. Oh, but we can't. She has to be next because of Democratic rules about demographics. Instead, they can't use their common sense and say, you know what? She's a really bad politician. I don't care about all the other demographic characteristics. She's really bad at this. She puts out word salad all the time. She's not particularly likable, and she does like a really terrible laugh whenever anybody asks her tough questions. Like, that's, yes, it's rough. But that's the truth. And Democrats are saying,
I'm speaking.
Yeah,
I'm speaking.
Thank you, Bella.
Okay.
Thank you. That is where Democrats have locked themselves into because of the orthodoxy and the rules. And conservatives and Republicans should be about liberty. And so in every political contest ever, I support competition. I want, it is not hateful. It is not anti-American. It is not disloyal for Donald Trump to have actually good competition in the primary for Republicans. It's insane not to. And I think that that's how this works. So some people pick Trump, some people pick DeSantis, some people pick Haley, whatever. And then we sort it out with a vote, like, fine. And then that's the nominee. And then your choice is between Joe Biden, who's barely there, and the Republican nominee. That should be relatively easy across the board. And somebody on the Super Text line said that Kamala Harris laugh you played, Bell, sounds like Mac laughing. That is cruel. I mean, don't hate on my brother Mac.
What happened? Who's
That the Kamala Harris laugh sounds like your laugh.
Oh my gosh.
You're gonna have to defend that. You're gonna.
It's not the first time people have said that. No, that's not me.
That is a rough time.
Ugh.
So I'm sorry, buddy. I'm sorry. Just
It's okay.
you can work through it. Some of you on the Super Text line have hit this point too about politics has become religion. And I think that's part of the problem is that the moment that politics is your salvation is the moment you got a big problem. I mean, I've as a staff attorney in Washington on 2 tours of duty, working in leadership, I got to be in the cool rooms, man. The highly decorated ones with the important, powerful people. And I realized that we need to relegate this to its proper role in our society. These are the winners of a popularity contest. There's a reason that the enumerated powers were enumerated, that they were limited, was because our founders, and frankly, anybody with a brain, has recognized that the private sector and average people can conduct their lives far better than anybody in Washington can, or any government for that matter. And so that right there is our posture, that this needs to be reduced, and our faith, particularly for those who claim to follow Jesus, we've got the Savior. We're good. We want to do what's right, and we want to serve. That doesn't mean we dismiss politics, but it is of a lesser order of importance. So I don't freak out. And every time people are telling me the world is going to end, America is going to end, it is dark and everything's bad, joy comes in the morning. I wake up and I'm like, this is great. I love seeing my boys in the morning before they go to school, love coaching youth football, love doing all this stuff. And you know what? It's great. Like Travis Tritt said, it's a great day to be alive. And so all these people telling you how everything's awful all the time, you need to stop listening to them. You need to stop listening to them because they're dragging you into the mud. They want you afraid because when you're afraid, you're stupid. And stupid people are easy to dictate to. And I don't want that for you. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for my family. And so when you relegate that political class to its appropriate level of importance, then you can experience freedom. And that's the goal. And when we come back, I don't know what exercise of freedom has anybody excited about this GOP debate, but it's happening tonight, and we got to be looking out for something. And so we're going to talk about it when we come back. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
A disturbing discovery inside of a New York City daycare, plus an active investigation right here in Tennessee after a pregnant woman was shot. That and more 2:30 Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt. Every time Matt's out, I take the opportunity at least once a show to let you guys know how much he appreciates you guys. Like, it's weird when one of your friends is constantly talking about the folks that he engages at work. And I'm not
coming at this just all willy-nilly ad hoc, people.
And I'm not just talking about like the people that work here at Cumulus. I'm talking about you guys. And we've even got certain when I'm here, I'm looking for different things. Like Ray, every time I'm around, Ray shows up. It's like he has a radar, so he can come and like call me Cameron Conway Romney or Romney what's it? I forget the order that he says it, but we build relationships with you, the listener. And so, every time Matt's out, like he takes it seriously, and I take his show seriously because he values the relationships with you guys. So I just wanted to take a moment to mention that. And that's another moment that I don't have to talk about this god-awful debate tonight. Let me just start there and say terrible. Because I've listened, because it's kind of part of my gig as a columnist over at the Tennessean, and call me a political pundit, whatever. I listen to these folks talk about this debate like, well, this is an opportunity for them to break out. If they just are very clear in their position about Trump, then blah, blah. And it's just not exciting, right? And this is for all you guys that get mad because I'm honest about Trump. I will give Trump a very clear compliment right now. He is the most authentic candidate I've seen. He is what you get. You can like it, you can not like it. He has not changed since he showed up on the political scene. You can say he's not your cup of tea, but then he wasn't your cup of tea when he started. And that authenticity really matters in the fakeness of politics. I'll use Mike Pence as an example. I like a lot of Mike Pence's policies. He's arguably the most pro-life candidate up there. I've met Mike on several occasions in my work in Washington. He's a very consistent guy, but he comes off as almost like cardboard. Like every hair is in its place. Everything's very composed, and he talks with a cadence that is so slow that you fall asleep. And so that manicured thing just doesn't connect with voters anymore. And I've had to realize this. Like I'm a policy nerd at heart. I'm an attorney who's worked on the Hill, who thinks about policies and budgets and budget windows and legislative text and all. If you're in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. And I think this idea that there's this magical world where average voters are like, please tell me more about the specifics of policies. That's not how this works. It's you got to have the capacity to govern. You got to have some good ideas and know how to execute them. And then other than that, you've got to engage the voter. You got to be entertaining. The reason Reagan won, and I use Reagan as a good example because Reagan did something that I thought was really cool. He won most of the country, not just most of Republicans or most of Democrats, like everybody. And I think that's really cool. I like that model. I like the idea that there are some Democrats that might say, you know what, I agree with you on enough that I'll vote for you. I mean, that's insane. That's great. Like, imagine in modern politics where you had like 86% of the country support you. I mean, that we can't even think like that now. And so the point about Trump's consistency matters because he's authentic and he's engaging. Say what you will about personality, character, all that other stuff. But in terms of authenticity and engagement, both are quite high. I think he's taken a hit on the engagement part, partially because of his legal baggage and all of that stuff, but not showing up with the debate, even for my friends who are super Trump people, him not showing up sort of is like, wait a minute, you're the fighter, man. You remember that whole presidential race where you were a juggernaut and you cleared the field and you did all that stuff and you just tore them apart? Why are you running Joe Biden's campaign now? A couple of super texters have said that. Why in the world are you pulling a strategy from Joe Biden and saying, I'm going to run from the basement? That I can just sit here in the basement, not actually throw down with any of you guys. I'm still going to win. It's going to be really awkward if we have a basement versus basement general election where there is no campaigning. It's just Biden. He's like, I'm going to go to bed early. And Trump's lawyers telling him he can't talk. There's going to be a real interesting campaign. But I think you have to show up. You have to show up. It matters. And I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics polling right now. We'll talk about that because it's an average of polls, which I think gives you maybe a little bit better of a picture, but it ain't going in a way that's favorable to the field. We'll talk about that after the break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
"30 minutes after the hour of 2 o'clock, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Currently 88 degrees and sunny in Nashville. Some possible storms later on this afternoon. Rutherford County already felt some of those, but now those are past the mid-state. Full weather forecast in 2 minutes. A new disturbing discovery inside of a New York City daycare center. Derek Dennis.
It was an entire 3D gun printing operation inside a licensed in-home apartment daycare, say New York City police, busted by officers executing a search warrant in East Harlem. A 3D printer, 2 completed ghost guns, and another one close to being finished found. Mayor Eric Adams shocked.
Who would have thought that we must add to our list of inspections? Do we have 3D printers that can print guns?
3 arrests made, including 2 juveniles and the resident of the apartment. Among the charges, manufacturing a machine gun.
And the ghost gun discovery follows the fentanyl poisoning of 4 babies, killing 1 in a Bronx daycare center earlier this month. Prosecutors say fentanyl was found in the same room where the babies were sleeping. An active investigation in Tennessee. Police are looking for a person who fired shots at a car and hit a pregnant passenger last night. A black Nissan Maxima pulled up on Lewis Street to a group of people just for a woman to come out of the car, spray bear spray at a crowd, and then they drove off. And that's when someone began to fire shots at that vehicle. One of those shots hit a 23-year-old pregnant woman who was in the front seat. MNPD detectives are working to confirm the shooter's identity, who's described as a young man wearing a white shirt. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Welcome back. Time flies when you're having fun, and it has flown by today. On the Super Talk text line, in talking about the debate and me jokingly referring to Trump and Biden's general election being a basement campaign. This is the kind of stuff, and this is from a texter with a California number. This is the mindset that I think is bad for Republicans. Are you smoking crack? Trump should not show up. He's the only attractive candidate. They all know it. They need him for ratings. Screw them. Screw all the GOP. Trump's the only one who has any balls. He doesn't need to show up. Okay, like I hear you.
That was a question and a statement, though.
Yeah, I don't.
Yes, he is smoking crack, but the rest is not correct.
Right. So this is the mindset. There is only one anointed one, and so why are we even going through the motions? Why are we even like having a competition in the why don't we just dispense with the primary and just re-anoint the guy who lost to Biden? Like, why don't we do that? That seems like a terrible idea. I think competition is a great idea, and if Trump wins again, so be it. Like, that's fine. That's how this works. But to say I hate the GOP, screw the Republicans. I'm Trump. Well, I don't. I actually think that like there's a lot of Republican voters that are looking at this, and we've heard this and we've seen this repeatedly, that they're sort of like Trump but open-minded. Like, he's number one, but like, okay, show me something. The problem is the rest of the field has shown them absolutely nothing. The closest in my mind would be Haley at the last debate. She got my attention. Like, she was not on my radar. I was like, okay. Like, that's pretty interesting. She held her own. She took her shots. She didn't back away. She knew what she was talking about. She was quite prepared. And she was engaging. You know, I like some of Tim Scott's policies and things like that. Tim Scott was not particularly engaging in the last debate. That's a problem for him. When you look at the polling, the Real Clear Politics average, which again, I use it because it's the average of a lot of different polls. Trump 56.6, and this is the most recent average through 9/26. Trump 56.6, DeSantis 14.4, Haley 5.8, Ramaswamy 5.1, Pence 4.2, Scott 2.8, Christie 2.7, Burgum 0.9, Hutchison 0.6. And if you look at the rundown of sort of how Trump's lead has gone, it's just kind of fluctuated up and down, but within a pretty tight range. I mean, there's some polls that have shown him, but it's basically been unchanged. And when I'm looking at DeSantis, I mean, basically unchanged. Haley's done better. Ramaswamy did better and is now done worse. But the rest of the field, I mean, nothing has changed. And so the thing that I'd put out there to you guys is, like, what could change your mind? What could make you say, okay, I'll give Haley a shot. I'll give Tim Scott a shot. I'll give Ron DeSantis a shot. I looked at Ron DeSantis and said, hey, if the Republican Party is where Trump is generally, which is true, that's unmistakable. Like, the Republican Party has changed. It is no longer what I'd call business class Republican. It is very much populist. And what I mean by that is we're more interested in using government to get the things that we want now than Republicans have been in a long time. This isn't the government should stay away. Bell made a good point earlier. It's basically we want our goodies to be different, but we still want goodies. That's kind of where the Republican Party is. I had said, and I've written this, that DeSantis seemed to me like a very Trump-like candidate without all the baggage. Well, here's DeSantis' problem. Trump is in the race. So he doesn't have the baggage, but he also is not Trumpier than Trump. And now that it's actually Vivek Ramaswamy who's emerged as the Trumpiest candidate. Again, he's got the problem Trump's still in the race. But so when DeSantis tries to differentiate himself, he's like, well, I'm a lot like Trump, but also not like him. But I don't have baggage. And it's just kind of weird. And one of the things where I think I probably made a little bit of a mistake is I said, Ron DeSantis, he's like Trump without the baggage. So it seems like a rational choice. But the problem was it's still like Trump. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm simply saying if you're like someone that's in the race and people like the person you're like more than you've got a problem. And I think that's what we're seeing with DeSantis is he's not gaining additional traction because he has to pull from Trump. And so basically Trump's battleship has to be blown up for DeSantis to get those voters. And do I think if you take Trump's numbers and add them to DeSantis, there's your candidate, right? That's easy. But I don't think at this point, DeSantis has proven no ability to clear the rest of the field or attract Trump voters. I think Ramaswamy has a similar problem in that he's like, I am Trump 2.0 and Trump 1.0 is in the race and people like him more. I think Haley is a different candidate and provides an alternative, but I don't know that folks are there. I think, is she smart? Is she conservative? Is she capable of running government? Absolutely. But I don't know what it is that people would say, you know what? I've stuck with Trump this long. And there's sort of this like how Republicans learn to stop worrying and love the Trump. Like it's very much this like, we've stuck with Trump for this long. What is it that you think would make us not go with Trump? And so I asked that question openly. If you guys want to tell me on the Super Talk text line, what could possibly make it so that another candidate, I'll say Haley, but it doesn't matter, like that another Republican is going to get your vote. I just don't know what that is. And yeah, okay, so say Rhino. Like, that's the one. Haley's a proven Rhino. I don't know how she's proven, but I do think that, I mean, how's she going to... I'm without words, but let me explain this in a way that I think makes sense. I'm not sure the other candidates can adequately attack Trump because many of them have benefited from Trump. Like Chris Christie lands punch after punch on Trump, but they have no impact. Why? Because everybody remembers when Chris Christie was Donald Trump's lapdog. When he was, shilling for Trump, and now he's like, you're the worst. Okay, but once you've benefited from that politician, once you've sort of said, hey, I'm in this candidate's camp, then it doesn't connect. Like, even let's just assume Chris Christie's right about some of the stuff that he's saying, right about Trump on the border. I did love the hilarious Matt Walsh moment that, what's the interview that Trump did, Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
Asked, what is a woman? And Trump really struggled with the answer. That was the Matt Walsh moment. Like, what is a woman? And Trump seemingly struggled to answer. Like, okay, well, maybe that type of thing could have an effect, but it's not being picked up here in the polls. And so I'm not seeing how any of these people that are basically, with the exception of Burgum, I don't see that he has any real connection to Trump. Maybe Scott, but Haley certainly does. DeSantis certainly does. Pence certainly does. Ramaswamy, I think, wishes he was Trump's child. So he's clearly an acolyte. So the point is, It's Trump and then all these people that owe a lot of their political fortunes to Trump. And I think that makes it hard for people to say, you know what? I think Nikki Haley's the best option here. Because it's like, well, she was the UN ambassador for Trump. So she's telling me, well, Trump's not the right person now, but she thought he was the right person then. And that I think is the difference here and why maybe we see some movement, but I just don't think that the debate tonight is going to make more than a couple points difference. Like, okay, so maybe we see Trump drop to 52 points in the average, and maybe somebody else, those are picked up or spread evenly. I just don't think we're going to see DeSantis at 20 points, 25 points, 30 points. Like, it's not there. Either none of these polls matter because of where we are in the race, which is possible, or nobody's excited about anybody else. And I've heard a lot of they're running for vice president. Like, okay, well, I guess we're going to find how this goes tonight. So there's the silver line. There's something that I can point to say, hey, there's a reason to watch and pay attention. The reason to watch is because I will be live tweeting this at D. Cameron Smith. I don't have football practice tonight, so I will park myself in front of the TV, probably take a lot of pictures of the TV, my dogs, and other things, and then make jokes about things that people are saying. Great point. A great summary of what I've been saying from the Super Talk text line. Why would you want the coattails when you can have the coat? And I think that's what a lot of voters are saying is I can get candidates like Trump. I can get candidates who sort of have some of the pieces and who don't have the baggage. But they're not what I actually want. And I think this is a big problem, is that all the folks that were alternatives to Trump in this cycle who thought, you know what, I can offer a real difference and I can get in there and make the case. Like, you know what, he's old. We'll make one case. We either get one more term with Biden or we get a term with Trump and then moving on. Like a Glenn Youngkin or somebody like that can make a pretty strong case. Just like, nah. And I get why. Like, I understand it. It makes sense, but this field is boring. And I think what we could see tonight is those who are actually realizing the moment and where they are, and those who are saying, you know what, I'm running for president. Because if they're not attacking Trump tonight, based on these numbers, they're starting to get to a point where those attacks they got to do something. And so if they're all nice and talking policy and punching at each other, and Trump is not attacked tonight, just bank on these people running for vice president. I got to take a break. We'll come back. We'll finish up the show. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
A government shutdown looming just a few days away. A baby found alone inside of a rental unit. Plus some new developments in the investigation of a shooting that happened near a school bus stop. That and more 3 o'clock right here. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, our time has come and gone. I've appreciated you guys today. Excellent conversation. Y'all are on it today. And one caller, I think, summed up a lot of the last conversation that we were having. As a Trump supporter, it's a no-brainer to support him again. He's already proved that he will do what he says. The old saying, the proof is in the pudding. Guess what? Trump pudding tastes pretty darn good. That's a weird thing to think about Trump pudding generally, but the sentiment's quite right. That if everybody's sort of like, I'm sort of like Trump, then you have the genuine article there. And then the question is, do the charges hit? Or is it just a witch hunt? And I've said, and I'll say repeatedly, I think he's got a problem with the documents. That documents case, I think, is going to be on him. But right now, he's the authentic candidate. He's the genuine article. And that matters to people. So we'll see you tonight at D. Cameron Smith on Twitter. Join the conversation. Let's have it back and forth. See if anybody's interesting. See if anybody decides to run for anything more than the vice presidency. And who knows? It might actually be interesting television. There's no football tonight. I'm Cameron Smith. I've appreciated your time. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.